Welcome to the Movement MMA Betting Show. I'm Daniel Levy from Best Fight Picks and Half the Battle, joined now by Dan Tom of MMA Junkie and the Protect Your Neck podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about UFC Vegas 10 because Michelle Waterson is taking on Angela Hill in the main event. But before I check in with my co-host, Dan Tom, just got to let all our Canadian listeners know to go to blitzbet.eu, and all our American listeners, stay tuned for news coming soon. Dan Tom, how are you doing this week?
Doing excellent, man. It's another fight week. Ready to see what the punches of the MMA universe throw at us. We got a lot of fights going on, man.
You know, in this main event, it's tough to root against both these ladies. I mean, I feel like they both bring a lot to the table, obviously inside the cage, but outside the cage, it's hard not to root for them. Like I said, look, Michelle Waterson, obviously she's got one of the best personalities in the game. She's a mom. She's got the karate style, that sidekick, the head and arm throw. She can take your back. She's very fun to watch. And Angela Hill is actually making history this Saturday night because she's going to be the first ever Black female to headline a UFC event. So just in that in itself, I'm very honored to give a prediction for this fight and to break it down. And Dan Tom, I mean, what are your initial thoughts of this main event here between Hill and Waterson?
Well, I like kind of where you started off, Dan. You said outside of the cage. That seems like a funny place to start off. We're talking about fights here, and if you listen to me or Dan, folks, you guys know that we can talk about some fights, but as we always bring up, it's important to bring up the outside factors. You know, we talk about fighters, to borrow a term from Dan in his podcast, Half the Battle. We talk about them pulling stunts, or, you know, we even talked about fighters to watch out for, like Carol Hosa, and she didn't even make it to fight night last week. But what ended up happening, some of the stuff we portended, those intangibles and variables can bite a fighter in the butt. So for this fight, Dan, I'm more looking at it how that translates to the public. I'm not too worried about these girls. These girls are veterans. They know what to do. They've been in many styles matches, many different organizations. They both have 5-round experience. Of course, that is a big factor we have to talk about, right? The fact that this just got moved to a 5-round main event. But as far as outside the cage goes, here's where my outside the cage eyes are, Dan. It's the perception of both ladies, or the perception of fighters in general, and how that can muddy up the betting lines in public perception. Now, Angela Hill was opened, I believe, as the favorite, so we're not seeing any dramatic swings in the lines yet. However, I do wonder, Angela Hill's popular for good reason. I'm a big fan. We could talk about that in a second. But as much as people love Michelle Waterson, I'm also sensing some dissension, you know, as far as public sentiment toward Waterson. And I always warn people, don't let things that are a little too far outside the cage sway how you bet a fight. You know what I'm saying here? Am I ranting, Dan, or am I on to something?
No, you are onto something, because I could sit here and just be, you know, enamored with the fact that, you know, Angela Hill is making history this weekend. I could also sit here and you know, build up the fact that I find the little video she posts on Instagram to be really funny. I think she's got an amazing personality. I think she's been working on her skill set, been putting together wins. So there's lots of good things we can say about Angela Hill. Now, I'm glad you touched on the fact that this is a 5-round fight, not a 3-round fight, because for me and my prediction, that completely changes everything. How do you feel about that?
It does, man. In fact, and I'm going to have to go back with a little bit of a finer comb to go back further to see how they fared. Both fighters have made improvements. Cardio is a weird thing. Cardio, you know, the people are fighting in the pandemic era, Dan, but then again, cardio is probably the easiest thing to train in this pandemic era. Am I right? And both girls, if you follow their social medias, they've been training hard using their home facilities as well as multiple other facilities. So I'm not too worried from the physical standpoints. But if we get into a stylistic standpoint, it does get tricky. You know, you want to, you know, initially I'm leaning toward Hill's volume and those things, but Hill, because of her volume, she will have to take pockets to recover if you watch carefully in her fights. So how does that affect over a 5-round fight, much less a last-minute 5-round fight? Whereas Waterson, even though I don't like her as much in the striking department, the volume department, although she does throw variety, just doesn't always land. So in the striking volume department, I don't like her in 3 or 5 rounds in comparison to Hill. However, in a 5-round tactical fight, it's not just about striking. We're also talking about takedown, something that everybody overlooks when talking about Michelle Waterson. It's something she's quietly been doing to score points. And when you can get that takedown in top position, even though I don't think she can submit Angela Hill, especially this iteration of Angie, can she get her breaks to where, it nullifies the striking, it nullifies the cardio, it nullifies that last minute edge while still scoring points with the judges? So that's the tricky part for me, Dan. Am I off base with any of those worries?
No, not at all. I mean, the only thing, and it's not a matter of being off base, it's just a matter of opinion. I would say that actually there is a chance Michelle Waterson can submit Angela Hill. And the reason I say that, Dan Tom, is because if you watch Michelle Waterson's fight with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, one doesn't simply take Joanna Jędrzejczyk's back. And you already know Joanna's never been submitted before. But on the flip side, Angela Hill's been submitted more than once. So I'm curious to see what happens if Michelle Waterson uses her head and arm throw, which seems like a low percentage move, but she seems to hit it almost every fight, and then in turn takes her back. I want to know what happens there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I meant by going back to look at their past 5-round fights, because that Jędrzejczyk one, Dan, I can pretty much blindly say that you probably had Jędrzejczyk as well. I don't think it was too much of a surprise to pick a Jędrzejczyk in that spot. However, giving credit where credit's due, even me, you could accuse me of maybe not being as high as I should be in Michelle Waterson, but you got to give credit where credit's due. And there are some things in that fight that are worth going back to look at. Like Dan mentioned, that back take. And, not that you want to, look at stats or look at things, even when you look beyond stats, you want to look at things within context. However, when you see someone like Loma Lookmungmi, who should be fighting at atom weight, taking down Angela Hill, granted, she's a good Thai fighter who I'm a big fan of. Thai fighters have really good sweeps that are often go overlooked and unrated when translating into MMA. Sure, she wasn't able to do much with it. Angela Hill was able to get back up, win the fight. But the problem is, if people are still able to hit takedowns in theory, that's got to have you worried if you're an Angela Hill supporter. So that is kind of the worry for me with the takedowns. That being said, tipping my hand, my pick, which this is one of those ones where I will reserve my right to change. However, I did submit my staff picks for Junkie already. That pick says Angela Hill. I am leaning with her over the course of 5 rounds, perhaps even a late stoppage when you look at the right hands on how it's been able to hit, from Courtney Casey against Michelle Waterson. When you go back and look at that fight and you look at how Angela Hill's been getting a bit better at sitting down on her shots, I'm going to lean Hill here. But I'd be lying to you, Dan, if I said I wasn't worried about some underdog upset potential in Waterson.
Now, I mean, Dan Tom, we can't get through an episode of the Line Movement MMA betting show without me, stating a controversial opinion. But before we do that, we got to let everyone know to go to linemovement.com and follow us at line_movement. But Dan Tom, you ready for the controversial opinion? Why the hell is everyone acting like Angela Hill versus Claudia Gadelha was this big robbery? If you watch that fight round by round, the reality of what happened was in round 1, not much happened, but Claudia Gadelha got the takedown. She edged that round. In round 2, Angela Hill got the knockdown, so obviously she gets that round. But when you knock someone down and then you coast in the final round and it's 1-1 going into the third round, how are you going to sit here and cry robbery? So everyone acting like that's the biggest robbery they've ever seen. Give me an effing break, because no, it's not. Like, I've seen way worse robberies. Like, again, if you're going to drop someone in round 2 goes to you. That doesn't mean that round 3 automatically goes to you. You got to go out there and win round 3. So I felt like round 1 is clearly Claudia, round 2 was clearly Hill, and round 3 could have gone either way. That's not controversial to me, Dan Tom.
Yeah, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, because if someone searches Twitter, maybe I did lean Angela Hill live. That being said, what I do remember, Dan, is I remember not being comfortable in that third round, and whether I tweeted it or not, I did not like that I guess you kind of said it best, the coasting, if you will. I mean, you can't be too careful with judges. It might not have been coasting in Angie's mind or in most of ours, but we know MMA judges, and that's why I always love when people get upset when I always tweet my scores in reference to what I think the judges are scoring, because it doesn't matter what I think, folks. It matters what the judges think, okay? And let's not, be surprised if, a judge turns in a bad scorecard. That's like almost every fight card by now, folks. So, for people that might think that it wasn't, according to MMA, it is coasting. And we might not agree with it on normal standards if all things were equal, but all things aren't equal in the fight game, as we know. and you really got to go out there and close the show. So even if you did lean to Angela Hill, you can't cry robbery there with the way that third round went.
And then there's another fight that Angela Hill had that some people are saying could have gone either way, and I could not disagree more. And that's a fight between her and Yan Zonan. And from my vantage point, Yan Zonan won 14 minutes of that fight. The only part that Angela Hill won was at the end of that round when she got that near triangle choke. I mean, the entire round's going Yan Zonan's way up until that point. But if you want to edge that round to Angela Hill because of the triangle, I completely understand. But aside from that, you can't score any round for Angela Hill in that fight. That was 30-27 Yan Zonan before it's 29-28 Angela Hill. So I'm just throwing that out there. But with all the controversial quote-unquote decisions aside, we got to give a pick. You're going Angela Hill. And if this was a 3-round fight, I'd be going Angela Hill too. But even though I think Angela Hill has more depth in her striking, obviously she's got way better hands. There's not even a comparison. Karate Hottie barely throws hands at all. I feel like Karate Hottie's actually kind of limited in her skill set. She's got a side kick, a head and arm throw, and a back kick. And she's gotten to the top 10 with just those 3 tools. I mean, look, we know we can look each other in the eye with a straight face, and I know she's got more tools than that. Like, I'm not oblivious, but like, those are her 3 main weapons. Let's not even sit here and act like they're not. So it's a thing where I think this fight's going to be close, but I have questions about Angela's pacing in the later rounds. I still got questions about her ground game. I want to know what happens if Michelle takes her back. So I line this a pick 'em. You're telling me Michelle's the underdog. I'll roll the dice. I'll take Michelle Waterson in this one.
Hey, the value is definitely on the underdog here. And don't forget about that crescent kick, Dan. That crescent kick's lethal.
Co-main event of the evening in the lightweight division, we got Kama Worthy, the streaking Kama Worthy, and he's taking on Ottman Azaitar. One of the Azaitar brothers, not Abu. It's Ottman this time. And man, those guys, I got a lot of respect for those guys inside the cage and outside the cage. They're people you don't want to cross the Azaitar brothers. Let's just leave it at that. But Kama Worthy, when we talk about someone that overcomes adversity, when we talk about a guy who, he could have packed it in, man. He had like 5 knockout losses. He could have been like, you know what? This stuff isn't for me. Like, I gave it my best shot, but that's not what Kama Worthy did, Dan Tom. Kama Worthy, because the reason I bring up these losses, it's like, it's one thing to have 5 decision losses, but when you have 5 knockout losses, people are questioning your chin. Opponents are licking their chops to get a chance to fight you. People are blowing up your manager's phone with fight opportunities because they can't wait to get that Kama Worthy name on their resume. They think it's easy money. And this is a guy that completely changed his career around. And I also feel like if you look at the facts, most of those knockout losses were at 145 pounds. So I got a question here. Was it a case of, at 145, he was cutting too much weight, he couldn't take the best shot? Because you look at him at 55s, and he ain't no small 55er, Dan Tom. I mean, the guy's built like an ox. He's tall. He's got reach. But most importantly, when he hits these guys, you see a certain reaction in their face. You saw, with Devontae Smith, we didn't really see the reaction in the face. We more so saw his body flying back. But with Luis Violent Bob Ross Pena, you could see in that first round when he got touched, he was like, oh, I realized he hit like that, So I feel like Kama Worthy is a very underrated guy. And my biggest question is there a chin issue, or was it a weight cutting issue, or is it a matter of like, now that he's on this big win streak, his chin hasn't been properly touched? And the reason I bring that up, Dan Tom, is because Ottman Azaitar, 12-0, 9 of those wins are by knockout. So this is the fight that's going to let us know if his chin is actually recovered by moving up a weight class, or if he's just been getting some favorable matchups. Because Ottman Azaitar, one thing about him, you don't got to worry about Ottman Azaitar, burying his head between another grown man's legs and, making the crowd boo and, stalling and doing all these tactics you don't want to watch. The reason these two guys are in a co-main event is because Azaitar's a knockout artist. Kama Worthy has been finishing. He's been streaking. He's been doing everything you want him to do. But this fight's going to let us know where Kama Worthy stands, because Ottman Azaitar, I mean, I know you saw that UFC debut. Now, we can say whatever we want about, Timu Pakalin and this and that, but like, when you watch that knockout, that is one of the scariest knockouts I have ever seen in all my time watching MMA. So you know for a fact that both these guys are going to get tested on Saturday night, Dan Tom.
Yeah, I like how you started it off. You don't mess with the Azaitar brothers. We talked about the main event, Dan, how the 3-round to a 5-round changes this. Well, this one, if this was in Fight Island, let's just say I'd be going all in on Azaitar here. You know what I'm saying? If this was in Abu Dhabi or anywhere in the UAE, the Azaitar brothers are gonna, let's just say they'll turn the gas up. They'll turn the gas up. We'll just leave it at that. But on this end, just looking at it, just the styles matchup, none of that, none of the funny nods here we're given. I like Worthy here, Dan, and objectively, I always try to be objective on strengths and weaknesses, trends on both what the fighters are doing as well as what I'm doing. And anybody out there betting, this is a betting show, folks. You should always be critical at yourself, just as the fighters. Watch your performances, right? You're not fighting, but what are you doing? You're betting on these fights. You're this, you're that. And one of my weaknesses, Dan, you probably know this. I love those veterans. I hold on a little too long. I hold on a little too late. However, one of my strengths, I would argue, because I think you, I dare say, share the same strength, is we've done pretty good about cashing in on fighters, or at least picking and being tuned in on fighters who move up and it benefits them, all the way back from Robert Whitaker to much smaller, lesser known names than that. I feel like, Dan, we have a pretty good radar on that. And whether we've hashed out Worthy on this show before, it's hard to remember with all these turnarounds in this pandemic era fights. But yeah, I agree, man. I think, it was the case of being at 145 when you go back and you look at those getting stopped, and we talked about that with Maki Patolo. Again, it holds true with even a lower level guy who lost, but he did take a lot of shots from hard hitting fighters at 185 and has still yet to be stopped by strikes, for what that's worth. So as far as reading that goes, win or lose, I feel like I feel pretty confident that we're not crazy there. Now, does that mean Worthy's going to win the fight, folks? Of course not. If we had a crystal ball, we'd be doing even better than we're doing right now. We're going to be straight with you. We don't got that crystal ball. However, I'll tell you that I am going to pick Worthy in this spot. I'm a believer. I think this is a good matchup for him. And Azaitar, he's a KO or bust guy. He doesn't go past the first round very much. Yeah, the one time he did go to a third round, he got a KO. That is very impressive to me. However, that third round KO came against a fighter who was 3-0 at the time. I mean, this guy, hasn't exactly been facing the toughest competition. And correct me if I'm wrong, his brother, I believe, Abu, I think he at least has some wrestling credentials. Well, I just pulled up, maybe he left it off. He didn't care to fill out the bio sheet, but I pulled up his bio sheet just now the UFC sends out, Dan. And the only accolades on there are his regional Brave FC titles. And the guy says he's only started fighting since 2014 when he was 24 years old, 6 years ago. There's no wrestling credentials, no boxing, no amateur credentials, nothing. So, he's got crazy power and athleticism that's obviously served him well. Obviously, that's why he can make this big jump. But if you're doing the math on the rest of the paperwork, it doesn't add up for me, Dan. So I'm going to take Kama Worthy in this spot.
Yeah, look, I do think Kama Worthy is the better fighter across the board. It's just a matter of if he gets starched in the first round, I'm not going to sit here and act surprised, because Azaitar does carry that one punch knockout power. No questions asked. Kama Worthy's been knocked out more than once. So, I mean, again, you add up simple math. If that outcome happens Saturday night, you can't sit here and act surprised. That's just the bottom line. But I do like the progress I've been seeing from Kama Worthy. I like his evolution. I like his confidence, because, again, like I was telling you a couple of years back, when people are blowing up his manager's phone to get a chance to fight him so they can get this quote unquote easy win, I guarantee you Kama was feeling differently about himself back then than he is now on this big win streak and undefeated in the UFC at the moment, coming off 2 finishes in the UFC. Did he get a performance bonus for the second one? I don't remember off the top of my head, but bottom line,
he should have. I mean, the upset numbers this guy's putting up there.
It was beautiful. I mean, to see that, he's not just this, one-dimensional striker. He's got a ground game too. I mean, that was a nasty choke. I like his takedown defense too, his get-up game. And when he finally did get taken down, it's not like he's some, fish out of water. He knew what he was doing everywhere. So I like his progress. I think he's in a better spot right now. It's just, again, I'm not counting out Azaitar because he does have the one big path to victory, and it's a real legitimate path. So I'm not going to be surprised either way, but I got Kama Worthy. I'm going to edge him in this one. Now, the featured bout, we got a rematch, Dan Tom, because Andrea Lee is taking on Roxanne Modafferi. And actually, Roxanne Modafferi beat Andrea Lee the first time unanimously. It wasn't controversial at all. I'll just tell you that right now, Dan Tom. But that being said, lots has changed since the last time they fought. Both these ladies have evolved a lot. Roxanne Modafferi actually went out there and got either the biggest upset of 2020 or the second biggest, depending on where you rank Shanna Dobson versus Maria Agapova, right? But up until that fight happening, the biggest upset of the year was Roxanne Modafferi against Macy Barber. And look, she's a very skilled black belt. I know you remember when she went out there and upset Valentina's sister Antonina as well. That was in Russia. It's like you get the call. You get to fight a Shevchenko in Russia. That sounds like a death sentence. She goes out there. She gets the judge's decision, man. Even got a 30-27. So pretty damn impressive stuff. But look, if you look at this fight statistically, Andrea Lee literally has Roxanne beat in every single category, every striking number, every grappling number. I mean, there's literally not a single stat that favors Modafferi except the cold hard fact that she beat her once before. So listen, I'm going to go based off the evolution that both these ladies have been showing. I feel like Andrea Lee's gotten to a better point, even though, I mean, she's still out here, losing decisions to Lauren Murphy, even lost a 30-27 on one of the scorecards. Controversial or not, it's like, still, like, you weren't convincing enough for them. You know what I mean? So hopefully she's convincing enough here. I'm going to go with Andrea Lee via decision here.
Yeah, I got a full disclosure. I got to submit my staff picks in the beginning of the week, and another reason why I bring it up here, you guys just get to hear it first in Line Movement before any of them post, and we also don't know which ones are going to post. So oftentimes we're picking the whole cards up front. Now I can reserve my right to change that pick as I do with some of these picks. This feels like one where I feel like the dog is livelier than the number says. But I did submit Andrea Lee. Now the worry with Lee is I agree with what you said, Dan. She's the skilled fighter in everywhere, even without looking at the numbers. You just do the eye test, right? But MMA styles make fights, and the reason why that saying is so tried and true is because when you put certain styles together, things can happen. And as we've seen with Andrea Lee, she's got all this variety and strengths in all these different areas, but she tends to grapple when she doesn't need to, and when she does, it's not always the right type of grappling. She'll get to positions she needs to get, but she's so fluid, and she's just like, it's almost like a wind-up doll. Like, you crank it up and she goes, that she'll flow through position, and you're like, wait, no, stop at step 5. Don't keep going to step 6 and step 7 where you end up back on your feet, for Christ's sakes. And she grapples herself into a proverbial hole. Not to the sense where she's doing it like Tim Elliott, where she, falls into the guillotine. I feel like I'm always bringing up Tim Elliott and throwing him under the bus there with this example, but you know what I'm saying? She's not doing to that extent, but she is going to split decisions. Now, I may have picked Lauren Murphy because I've been on Lauren Murphy lately. I've been watching her, man. She's been making some quiet improvements. So I'm not going to condemn her for that fight. That being said, stylistically, I still worry about it. Grappling into a hole with Roxanne, and not only that, body language, right? I wasn't one making a upset at the decision with the Calderwood Lee fight. I wasn't too upset either way. I'm not trying to die on any hills, but one thing that people don't bring up when talking about that split decision in Abu Dhabi was Andrea Lee's body language. Now, she seemed to be dealing with some type of pain. That Abu Dhabi card was particularly hot. However, in other fights too, correct me if I'm wrong here, Dan, Andrea Lee always seems to have this body language. Even though she's putting out a lot of output and she's a good athlete, she almost looks like she's tired because she's got that Dominic Cruz thing where she's always like, ah. And body language is a big thing, folks. In close rounds, we're talking about stupid judges, right? So in close rounds, a lot of times they'll pick the person with the better body language. I've seen it all the time. I've seen a counter striker. You've seen this, Dan, outstrike someone in somewhat of a close round. But if you know what you're watching, the counter striker won. but they have maybe a bad body language, or they do something at the end. The other guy puts their hands up and they allow the round to be stolen from them. And I feel like Andrea Lee's that type of fighter as well. That being said, 37 Roxanne Modafferi is. She seems to be in the best shape of her life. So I don't want to write her off because of her age, but age and miles. I don't know, man. I'm going to lean Andrea Lee to decision, but if this fight's closer than the odds show, I'm not going to be surprised, Dan.
So Dan Tom, next up in the light heavyweight division, we got a matchup between slow Mike Rodriguez and Ed Short Fuse Herman. And man, this is an exciting fight because I like this kid, Mike Rodriguez. Look, he's got all the physical tools you want in a light heavyweight prospect. 6'4", has the 80-inch reach. He can flying knee like Yoel Romero. He can, his parrying game is on point. It's just I got questions when the fights get extended with Mike Rodriguez. And actually, interestingly enough, I'm going to be talking with Mike Rodriguez's coach and agent, Tyson Chartier, tonight on Half the Battle. So I'm going to ask him firsthand about, what happens when these fights get extended. Why, does his game seemingly fall apart sometimes when he doesn't get that first round finish? I'm going to find out firsthand from the source tonight. So I'm very excited about that. But that being said, Dan Tom, there's a big likelihood he gets another first round finish here. Look, I love Ed Herman. I mean, this is a guy you and I grew up watching. I know you remember when he leg locked Kyle Noak back in the day. I know you remember that, Dan Tom, long time ago. And I mean, he's just I believe didn't he knock out Tim Crater as well? Dustin Poirier's former coach.
Yep.
I mean, look, Ed Herman, he's just been having so many great fights forever. True veteran of the game, someone we all respect. So I feel like Ed Herman has a path here. If he can avoid going down in that first round, drag this into deep waters, that'll favor him when they're both tired, they're both exhausted, and they got to dig to this place where, not many people are willing to go. I feel like Ed Herman's been there before. So if that happens, I would lean Herman. The thing is, I'm not convinced it gets there, Dan Tom. I feel like in that early going, there will be openings for Mike Rodriguez. His name is Slow Mike Rodriguez, but I feel like he's kind of smooth Mike Rodriguez in that early going, man. And if he lands one of those straights down the pipe, a knee, a left high kick, whatever the case may be, I think he can put down the guy we respect so much in Short Fuse Herman. So I'm going to officially go with Mike Rodriguez via first round knockout, but I cannot look you in the eye with a straight face and tell you I will not be worried if this fight gets extended and hits deep waters.
Yeah, you nailed it, man. You really nailed it. That's my biggest worry too, as far as falling apart. And I like Tyson Chartier, man. He's a really good guy to talk to. He's really sharp too, man. He's really sharp. Seeing some of his write-ups and listening to him talk and break down fights. So I'm gonna look forward to that interview, Dan. But yeah, I agree with you there. And with Ed Herman, I'm a big fan. There's not a lot of dogs that I like, especially wide dogs, right? And Modafferi and Ed Herman were ones at their numbers where I was like, okay, let's see if this should be as right. I don't disagree with any of them off first impression being dogs. That doesn't surprise me. But as big of dogs, let's look into that. And because I'm like, slow Mike Rodriguez. Oh, you're about to face the king of slow, son. Ed Herman. Ed Herman is the slow master. Oh, snap. Oh. And then I came back down to earth and I went, wait a minute. If Ed Herman wins, if he is the king of slow, and if he is slower than Rodriguez, that means he's going to lose this fight. And I also think, which is why I agree with you, I see a first round stoppage. But more specifically, and I'm a big Ed Herman fan, I've cashed at him on dog money, Dan. In fact, the last two times that Ed Herman got wins, not only did I pick him, was on the right side of playing him, but I actually called the method. The Tim Boesch fight I called live on Twitter because Tim Boesch kept ducking his head. And I have a tweet to prove me right there. And with that stuck in my head, I later called that for his later TKO finish that I'm drawing a blank on. So believe me, folks, I feel I like Ed Herman. I feel like I got a decent read on Ed Herman. But for the reason why, and I don't know if we differed because it wasn't really a fight that either of us could have been too confident on. But I remember that I took at least from picking perspective, I took Mearshart when that fight was originally supposed to happen, Dan. And I said it was because what surprised me was Ed Herman, you went back and you laid a lot of his resume out, which was great, Dan. The surprising thing, though, about his resume is for how deep it is, he hasn't fought a lot of southpaws. And when he hasn't done well. He's 1-2. The only guy he beat, you got to go back to 2007, Dan, against a guy named Chris Price. I know, really memorable name there. He armbarred him in the first round. So that fight took place on the ground. So aside from that southpaw victory, he got submitted by Maya, which, okay, that fight took place on the ground too. And he got knocked out by Derek Brunson. So he hasn't faced a lot of southpaws of late overall, and he hasn't done well. So against the one who's much faster, despite calling himself slow, I agree with you. He's a little more smooth, Dan. I'm going to go with Mike Rodriguez by first round stoppage, but stylistically, I'm worried about him falling apart. And as a bias, because I am an Ed Herman guy, I wouldn't exactly be upset for Ed Herman to take the ass whooping up front and then pay it back later. So we'll see.
Now, next up in the lightweight division, we got what should be a brawl. I mean, on paper, this looks like a serious firefight to me. We got Frank Camacho taking on Brock Weaver. I love this matchup, Dan Tom. But before I give you any of my opinions, I got to hear yours first.
Again, man, I'm excited what your opinion on this one is. I feel like I got a good beat on these guys, although I haven't admittedly run them through the full comb that I tend to do. But it's funny. We talk about southpaw records that I just picked off of, Dan. Well, I'm kind of going against that logic here because I am picking the favorite, I guess. Surprise, surprise. But what is surprising about that, perhaps, of Camacho being a favorite, regardless of whether or not you're picking him, is that I believe off the top of my head, he's 1-3 against UFC level southpaws, with the only victory being over Nick Hine. However, he's lost to guys like Beneil Dariush, Drew Dober, who are having, their second leases on UFC life, as well as unsung prospects like Jeff Neal, who we're wishing to get well and have a full recovery. So he's not exactly losing the slouches who are southpaws. So perhaps that's why, even though Camacho, who's got a big losing record, he's an action fighter. I love him. I love Frank. He's one of the nicest guys, a friendly style. So in no way do I mean any of this is a negative. But yeah, he certainly is an easy fighter to write off. So I don't blame anybody for fading him or not being high on him, regardless of whether or not you're looking to fade him here. But I am picking Camacho here, and I like him in this kind of fight. Brock Weaver is a southpaw who does well against other southpaws, but in this kind of a matchup, I'm not sure. I don't think he's got the back-taking ability to take advantage of the tripods that Frank Camacho usually does a good job of, unless he's facing like a Beneil Dariush per se. So outside of that, yeah, man, I don't know. I'm having trouble to see where Brock Weaver wins this fight. He's a dog, man. He's going to bring it. He just crowds his punches too much for my liking, even though that's not his style. He's quietly a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt, Brock Weaver is. But I have a hard time seeing where he wins this fight. So I'm going to take Camacho. I don't know if he gets a finish or not, but I'll take Camacho here. My crazy, Dan.
Well, you're not crazy. I mean, it seems like a lot of people are thinking he wins. I mean, he's a -2 something favorite, but I got to say this. I think I might be the only person on planet Earth that's taken Brock Weaver in this spot, and I'll tell you guys why. I mean, look, firstly, Frank Camacho's 2-5 in the UFC, and I know you conveniently left out that he got knocked out by Justin James. Yeah, it's cool to mention Drew Dober and Jeff Neal, but can we also mention he got knocked out by Justin James his last fight? And also the 2 fights he won, Nick Hine, not to discredit these wins. Nick Hine's a very tough guy. Nick Hine retired after that fight. Damian Brown's a very tough guy. I don't know what's up with those Australian judges. I felt like Damian Brown won that fight. I mean, Damian Brown almost choked him out on multiple occasions. So I think Frank Camacho's 1-6 in the UFC personally, and you add the Ultimate Fighter fight, I think he's 1-7 inside of an octagon. So that being said, the reason I'm taking Brock Weaver here, when you think about how to beat a guy like Brock Weaver, I mean, does Brock Weaver have to worry about, getting humped and wrestled against Frank Camacho? Not really. Does he have to worry about getting out-techniqued against Frank Camacho? No. All he's got to worry about is maybe don't get knocked out. But the thing is, a brawl is the kind of fight that favors Brock Weaver. So I feel like Frank Camacho historically slows down after the first round every single fight. And I've actually heard from former teammates of his that it's not just a thing in the cage, it's a thing in the gym as well. That he's great when he's fresh, but as soon as he gets tired, he starts to break a little bit. And the thing I liked about Brock Weaver on Dana White Contender Series was there was no breaking in a guy like Brock Weaver. He's one of these guys that he got taken down early, he gets back up, he turns it into a serious fight, a dog fight, and that's where he excels. And I'm not convinced that Frank Camacho can push that pace for all 3 rounds against a guy like Weaver. So you look at Weaver's UFC debut, and officially, he won a DQ, and I thought he wasn't looking that good until he got, knocked out with the illegal knee. But like, when I really think about it, man, it's like on Contender Series, he got taken down early too. He comes back and he wins that fight. He never got the opportunity to come back and win that UFC debut against Vargas because he got knocked out with an illegal shot. Like, so it's really tough for me to watch that fight and be like, oh, this guy is this guy is that, this guy doesn't belong, because it's like he didn't get the opportunity to prove if that's true or not. Like, I feel like personally, and I could be way wrong, that he was going to get up and he was going to take over that fight. But the guy he was fighting, Vargas, who, by the way, has a reputation for being an extremely dirty fighter, has allegedly been kicked out of multiple gyms. And this isn't the first time he's been DQ'd before. That guy goes out there and straight up illegally knees him and knocks him out. So that sucked. Roosevelt Roberts, I feel like, not to make excuses, but I feel like that is a tough matchup for Brock Weaver stylistically. So this is the best matchup he's had since his Ultimate Fighter fight. Again, we don't have to worry about Frank Camacho coming out here, taking his back and choking him out. We don't have to worry about Frank Camacho's wrestling, or I know he's got this nice little trip takedown, but he doesn't hold anyone down. So I just feel like the only, I guess, worry would be maybe Frank Camacho knocking him out, but Brock Weaver has got a pretty solid chin. And you know what Brock Weaver did, Dan Tom? After his last fight, he was so embarrassed because he's a guy that, he's the king of Alabama. They don't have many fighters coming out of Alabama. I think, they got Eric Anders and Walt Harris, but they don't have many guys in the lower weight divisions. You know what I mean? So Brock Weaver, he's like the king of the trailer park. But after that Roosevelt Roberts fight, it was like, dude, like, if I want to hang around I know the stuff he wears on his head and the makeup, it looks cool and all that, but you got to go out there and fight, right, Dan Tom? So after his fight with Roosevelt Roberts, he's like, dude, I cannot continue going out there and not performing at my best. So he goes to ATT in Florida, and now he's training with guys like Francisco Trinaldo. He's training with Charles Rosa. He's training with all these killers in the lighter weight divisions. He's actually getting pushed for once in his life. He's finally not the king of the gym like he's been this entire time. And this entire time he's been the king of the gym, he still made it to the UFC. He still impressed Dana White on Contender Series. I feel like now we're going to see the best version of him. And I feel like it's going to be a dogfight, but simply put, Frank Camacho is going to gas after the first round, and I see Brock Weaver taking over. So I personally line this fight -110 apiece. But if you want to edge Camacho because he's got UFC experience, okay, -130 Camacho, -110 Weaver. So in what world should Weaver be +190 in this spot? Doesn't make sense to me. This is a dog or pass fight, and I will take the dog out right here.
I can see that argument for a dog or pass. Camacho opened at -155. That seems a bit more down to earth. I will say, though, the one thing I will argue, the reason why I conveniently left out the Justin James fight is because I conveniently cashed on Justin James and picked against Camacho.
Nice.
Because I actually know who the F Justin James is, and that is not a surprise. And I think that if Gavin Tucker continues on, even though he's kind of getting a late start, him almost stopping him will just kind of add to that sample size. Here's what worries me about the Justin James fight that neither of us have brought up, though. That's a quick turnaround off a knockout, and I don't like that. That was only in June. We're only in September now. That's only 3 months. I've said it on this show before, and I've been pretty consistent about that, Dan. I don't like guys coming back before that 5 or 6 month mark. Now, he didn't completely go out, but he took a lot of shots, was out on his feet. Sometimes those are the worst ones, and Camacho has a lot of damage on him. However, you could also argue that Weaver has more damage than he meets the eye. You included that Neil Magny loss. The fact is, they're both do or die fighters. Now, I don't disagree with the line being wide. I don't disagree even with anybody, making the dog or pass argument. Again, like I said, I'm not exactly surprised if anybody fades Camacho at this spot. I mean, I just faded him successfully at an even less promising short notice spot. I'm not going to call you crazy, Dan. I was surprised, but in no way do I think you're crazy for this pick. That being said, what what worries me is even though Weaver may have a better chance of it going to decision, if you look at both these guys' styles to their records, they're ultimately both do or die fighters here. And Weaver not only been stopped 5 times as a pro, but if you go to his amateur career, you include all those knockouts. I think there's 2 or 3, and then there's another 2 submissions. Either way, it's another 5 total stoppages. So the guy's actually been stopped like 10 times. And that's not even including all of his losses. So if we go and encapsulate their whole career, then yeah, it gets shifty on both sides. That being said, if the line keeps spreading like this, like yeah, the value is clearly on the underdog. So I think that the worry here or the warning here is not so much if you're going to pick Camacho. I'm thinking Camacho. I don't think you're crazy to pick Camacho, but parlay players out there, especially a fight like this or a card like this, where if you're like me and you don't like a lot of the dogs, you could fall into that parlay trap, which is a big enough trap as it is in MMA, folks. So I feel like me and Dan, if we can agree on something here, be careful if you're putting Camacho in that parlay, I think is the common ground here.
We definitely agree on that, Dan Tom. And I appreciate you bringing up that info that I actually was unaware of about his amateur history. So it's good to know. Now, Dan Tom, also in the lightweight division, we got a grudge match between Matt Frevola and Roosevelt Roberts. And for some reason, Roosevelt Roberts, after every fight he wins, he gets on the mic and he asks for Matt Frevola. Well, this Saturday night in Las Vegas, Nevada, live from the UFC I was about to say the Performance Institute, but live from the UFC Apex, we finally get this matchup between Matt Frevola and Roosevelt Roberts. And what's so exciting to me about it is obviously they're up and coming prospects, and we've been enjoying watching their progression. But interestingly enough, for Matt Frevola, this is the third 6'3" opponent he fights in a row. Dan Tom. He goes, Jalen Turner, Luis Pena. Oh, here you go. Here's Roosevelt Roberts. You don't get a short guy. You get to fight another 6'3" guy. So I got to give him a lot of credit. He's definitely acclimated his style to know when to shoot those takedowns, knows when to close the distance. Look, no matter how many times you fight a 6'3" guy, it's going to be tough every single time. So there's never going to be a time when Frevola goes out there and has a perfect performance against a 6'3" guy, because no matter what, they will always have physical advantages over him, period, point blank. But that being said, I feel like he's been finding a way to go out there and win these fights. And I'm curious to know your opinion if you think he can will himself to victory here once again.
This is a tough one, man. The line's close for a reason. This could be one of those fights where you're best just taking the dog if you're going to take anything at all. But I do find myself siding with Roberts, which is scary because Roberts tricked me into picking him against my man, Jim Miller. We saw how that went, and that was alarming. Not because Jim Miller, is older or Jim Miller is underrated. You could fall into the trap of falling into either narrative too strongly. What worries me is just the brass tacks, Dan. What happened in that fight? Making a dumb move, falling on his back, not even getting taken down, giving the takedown, and then scrambling right into the armbar and reaching deeper in like that. You should know that, like that. That was part of the reason why, if anybody thought he was going to beat Jim, it was because he has that decent amount of jiu-jitsu. Now, the jiu-jitsu that we do know is good is his guillotine, which may come in handy if he can dissuade Matt Frevola, who hasn't been submitted as a pro or as an amateur yet, but maybe he can dissuade him with that. We've also seen Matt Frevola kind of hot and cold with length fighters. He was able to get in extended scrambles with Jalen Turner, but in both fights, there were points where he didn't look comfortable. He can be found skirting the outside, which is not a good look for the judges or otherwise. But it's hard to pick against that. You always want to root for that Sarah Longo team, and even though it's quarantine era, I wouldn't be surprised to see a bunch of East Coasters sneak in to go steamroller and get me pumped up too, man. I part of me wants to root for Matt Frevola here, but as of now, reserving my right to change my pick. Apologize. I usually don't play offense like this, folks. If I do, it's for good reason. But right now, I'm going to lean Roosevelt Roberts. Am I crazy?
I mean, the guy is so talented. He's got so many physical tools. I feel like he's been making a lot of improvements every fight. And on the feet, as much improvement and as much aggression as Matt Frevola has, that's not his strong suit. We all know he gravitates towards that wrestling. So I definitely feel like there's paths to victory. And also, unlike a Jalen Turner, even though he, I believe, is a brown belt, I feel like in MMA, Roosevelt Roberts might be a little more opportunistic with his submissions. So maybe there's like a guillotine attempt waiting for Matt Frevola when he shoots this takedown. So I'd be worried about that kind of thing if I was taking Frevola, which actually I am taking Frevola. And the reason why, Dan Tom, is because I feel like when it really comes down to the nitty gritty, when this fight, when both these guys are gassed, when there's one round left in this fight, and it's 1-1 going into the third round, and it's all about getting that last takedown and keeping top control, I know I can trust Matt Frevola to do that before I can trust Roosevelt Roberts, because even in these fights against Alexander Yakovlev, I felt like he was giving up too much position, man. And in the Vince Pichel fight, that's what cost him. So he's so much more talented than these guys, but he's still on the up and up, man. He's still on the come up. And so is Frevola. I acknowledge that. So, you know, it could go either way. And again, like I said, maybe there's a long man choke waiting for Frevola on one of these takedown entries. So you never know. And maybe there's a reason that Roosevelt Roberts has been calling out Matt Frevola for all this time. Maybe he knows something we don't know, and he's got something planned, an ace in his back pocket. He's going to come out here and finish Frevola. But I really think if this comes down to a battle of wills and no one gets finished, that Matt Frevola can push harder, push longer, bite down on that mouthpiece, get that last takedown, hold that top control. I'm going Matt Frevola via controversial split decision. I believe that after this fight, people will be crying robbery on Twitter.
You know what I'm going to do? And I feel like people who've been watching this show who know me know I'm not easily influenced. So, it means something as I use air quotes there. But you know what I'm going to do right here? I'm going to switch my pick. You sold me, Dan. You sold me. I love Grit. It's hard for me to pick against Grit. More proven Grit. He's faced more proven fighters. He is 30 compared to Roosevelt Roberts, 26. I bring that up because now that you mention it, I think immaturity is a lot of the keys there. We still haven't really seen him, try to link up with a big camp, whereas Frevola already is, and cross trains in that Long Island contingent. Furthermore, now that you bring it up as well, man, that I don't know if I can trust that fight IQ, that fight IQ there I saw from Roosevelt Roberts. So, and the last thing I'll bring up is the call out. I forgot to mention off the top, and you reminded me. Call outs don't really work too well in MMA, I found, but whether you're an Olympian going John Jones, and we saw what happened in DC, or you're a lower level fighter in this pandemic era, you're calling out Sheena Dobson in a fight you should win, Maria Agapova. And how did that call out work for her? Call outs don't seem to be working too well right now, Dan. So, you swayed me, sir. I'm gonna go with Frevola as well here.
Hopefully that doesn't bite us in the ass, because I do think that, look, I can sit here on the mic and sound as convincing as I want and, say all these big words and do all these things. But at the end of the day, Dan Tom, they still got to get in the octagon and fight. And Roosevelt Roberts is still a 6'3" lightweight, no matter what any of us say. And maybe he knows something we don't know, because, again, he's been asking for this fight for a long time. But based off what I've seen, I feel like, again, that if it's a battle of wills and no one gets finished, I lean for Frevola there. Let's see what happens.
Yes, and just last thing, I just like the point that you brought up at the very beginning. This is his third fight in a row with someone like this. And as we said when we broke down the last Mike Rodriguez fight, when you see trends, whether in the negative or positive, and the style matchup keeps popping up, ride that trend, baby. If the matchmakers are going to give it to you, ride that trend.
Now in the welterweight division, this is a very interesting fight for a variety of reasons, Dan Tom. We got Bryan Barbarena taking on Anthony Ivey. So we'll get to Barbarena in a sec. Let's talk about Anthony Ivey, because if you only watch his UFC debut, you're going to be like, oh, this guy's in the UFC. But if you actually know the fact that, he got the call on a week notice, he didn't even get a training camp. It was basically show up, cut weight, and then get into a fight in the octagon. So when those are the circumstances, I can understand why a guy in Christian Aguilera who has double-digit knockout wins, when all you did to train for this fight was cut weight and you didn't actually train, I get why he looked how he looked. Now, if that happens again here, then maybe it's not as simple as saying, he just took that fight on a week notice and, he cut weight and then fought. Maybe it's not that simple, because the reason I say that, Dan Tom, is because this time Ivey's got a full training camp. So this time there's no excuses to be made if he gets stopped in the first round. But that being said, shout out to the great James Lynch. I heard his interview with Bryan Barbarena, and make sure you'll go to linemovement.com or follow us at line_movement. But I heard James Lynch's interview, and you know what Bryan Barbarena told him, Dan Tom? He told him that he started this camp at 240 pounds. Okay, so let's just think about that for a second. He's got to weigh 170 pounds. Now, I know he doesn't weigh 240 right now. I know he's probably, closer to 190 and this and that. But like, dude, a 70-pound weight cut from the start of camp. You're coming off 2 knockout losses. You're a guy that's been known for your comeback ability and your durability. And that allegedly appears to seemingly be waning. Man, oh man, am I sketched out by taking Barbarena as a favorite in this spot, Dan Tom.
Yeah, man. When I'm looking at big favorites, there's only one that kind of looks justified for me around these numbers. The other two were questionable. You did a great job of bringing up why the Brock Weaver Camacho line is. And this one is too. And this is coming from a Bryan Barbarena fan, a fan of durable southpaws who take ass kickings up front and give them later. A guy who has cashed for me against Warley Alves and Sage Northcutt when you could barely find people in sight trying to pick them. I love Bryan Barbarena more than most, my friends. I've got a bias more than most, my friends. But I absolutely agree. All that sketches me out. When you're telling Anthony Johnson to hold your beer for a welterweight weight cut, that's problematic, man. I mean, I was watching Tommy Spear versus Anthony Johnson going, how is this guy making cuts from that high? No wonder why he was at death's door. And you got to imagine what that does to Barbarena. And I watched that interview too, and it's hard to tell where his weight's at. Maybe it was 190, maybe it was 200. You can't tell when you have those duck. I'm jealous all y'all with the Duck Dynasty beards. You can hide the big. I can't hide my big cheeks or anything when I start gaining weight. You see it, but when you got the big Duck Dynasty beard, you can hide that MFer. You know what I'm saying? So who knows? It was really hard. I watched the interview, and that was very alarming too. Shout out to James. But yeah, who knows where he's even really at now? Not even weight, not even layoff, injury, right? And not even injury. I mean, he had extensive, I think, lumbar work done, back injury. Back injuries are real serious stuff. And not taking anything away from, I believe it was Randy Brown, who may have won that fight anyways. And maybe that, Bryan Barbarena probably should have been that favorite, even if he was healthy. So I am not trying to take away or play revisionist history. But if durable Bryan Barbarena went away a little faster than it seemed, it's because he admitted later, months after, because he didn't want to make an excuse. He's a class guy. He had to go through all this kind of surgery, has had an unhealthy back. So like that alone is enough of a question mark to keep me away, much less the layoff, much less the weight gain, much less the pandemic era. Although I will say, despite the pandemic era, if you've been following, from, I believe, I want to say Impa to John Salter and Bellator to Barbarena, like what do you call Knoxville guy, Scott
OSP?
Holtzman, yeah, OSP, or maybe OSP too. I don't know if he's in that group, but there's a really strong training group that Bryan Barbarena has been a part of. So he's been getting his reps in. He's been getting a lot of looks. I dare say he seems to have the options to have trained if they were there, but the flags are way too much. I'm a pick Barbarena, but in no way am I laying this chalk, Dan.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I completely understand Barbarena being favored here. I mean, he should be favored. I mean, the guys he's been there, the guys he has shared the octagon with, all this UFC experience, his skill set, no questions asked, Bryan Barbarena should be the favorite in this spot. But I am going to put my balls on the line and roll the dice and actually take a small flyer on the underdog here, because I do have questions about, a 70-pound weight cut like that. That's too much. That's about 50 pounds too much of a weight cut for me, Dan Tom. And look, I might be completely wrong on this one. And if Anthony Ivey gets knocked out in the first round again, I can't say I'll be surprised. I mean, Barbarena does have a couple first round knockouts in the UFC. Knocked out Proctor, knocked out Jake Ellenberger in the first round. So he's definitely done that. So that's not going to surprise me. And if he was pulling our leg about the 240-pound thing, if he's really, if he really has a six-pack this entire time, he goes out there on the scales, weighs 170 on the dot. I completely understand that it could look like the stupidest pick that anyone's ever made. But it's not like we're looking at like a pick'em fight. I mean, it's minus 270. It's almost 3-1 Barbarena. So with all those red flags, that's where I kind of draw the line. And even though Ivey has never fought anybody on this level, he's probably never performed on this level before, I still feel like that hunger has to be accounted for. And he's got some athletic tools too. But with a full camp, in shape, I'm going to roll the dice and take him here. But we'll see what happens, obviously, because I do agree with Bar being favored, and I completely understand why you're picking him here. I mean, he is the better fighter. But man, oh man, 2 knockout losses, 70-pound weight cut. I mean, the guy's originally a 55er. You know that, right, Dan Tom? But he likes drinking his beer on Saturdays. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's like he was struggling to make 55s. Now he's struggling to make 70s. So I don't know. I got too many questions to lay almost minus 300. I'd rather take a flyer on the plus 230, maybe a half unit shot, see what happens. I'll roll with Anthony Ivey here, and let's find out Saturday night.
Yeah, let's see. Anthony Ivey, also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt there, despite the submission losses, which is kind of surprised me when looking at his stats. Good luck on that. I mean, if there's a card to go contrarian, or a time to go contrarian, or the flags to go contrarian, I mean, it does check those boxes. So I can't argue or at least call you crazy, even if we're picking different fighters here. I can't call you crazy for playing against those flags, my man.
Hey, real quick, you said earlier that like there were 3 big favorites on this card. 2 you disagree with, but 1 you agreed with. Who was the one you agreed with?
Bobby Green.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Bobby Green is never, even now, a guy against a guy who doesn't have a lot of respect on his name. I'm surprised wasn't opened or even bet up further. But I got my own theories on Bobby Green. Again, he's a fighter that's going to do well in this pandemic era.
You know what, ladies and gentlemen? I want to hear Dan Tom's opinion. So let's go ahead and break down that fight between Bobby Green and Alan Patrick. Alan Patrick coming off a layoff. He didn't just lose his last fight, Dan Tom. That was devastating. But to put a little positive rub on Alan Patrick, I will say the fight before that, he went out there, and if you know anything about DraftKings, you know that putting up 9 takedowns is a big, big deal. So when he beat Damir Hadzovic, if you had him in your lineup, you were laughing all the way to the bank, assuming your other 5 plays were, on point. So Bobby Green, hey, in this pandemic, my boy's thriving. 2-0 in the pandemic. He's been doing his thing, and I like to see that consistency from Bobby Green. So I'm really happy about that, especially for a guy who he felt like he was on the wrong side of some split decisions that could have gone his way. Now, that's a separate discussion, whether we agree with that or not, but still to see him stick through it and, now he's finally reaping the fruits of his labor once again. Because, I mean, I remember when Bobby Green cashed that plus 250 against Josh Thompson for me back in the day. So I'll always have a soft spot for Bobby Green for that reason. So I guess my question is, Patrick, he's kind of a specialist. If he's going to win a fight, he's going to score a bunch of takedowns. And real quick, I know we love Michel Pereira because he goes out there and does backflips at the weigh-ins. Alan Patrick was doing backflips at the weigh-ins before Michel Pereira, so don't forget that. But I'm curious to see if off this 2-year layoff, if he's rejuvenated, if he's, found a new way, because he's not in Brazil anymore. He's actually in Florida now with Julian Williams at Fusion XL, with Jacare, with all these guys. So he's training with a really good group of people. So I'm curious if these 2 years off, he's been putting in work, he's going to come out a new man, or if he was kind of depressed after the Holtzman loss, if he maybe put on some weight, and maybe we don't see that same freak athlete. So I got a lot of questions going into Saturday night, Dan Tom.
Yeah, man, me too. He's come off 2-year layoff successfully before between Stevie Ray and Damir Hadzovic, so he has made this jump before, but it is the pandemic era. He is older. He is 37 years old now, whereas Bobby Green, you think Bobby Green would be the 37-year-old with all the guys he's been facing. Not the
Wow.
case. I want to say Bobby Green in 32 or 33 level, even if he's 34 or 35. Yep, he's 34. Yeah, even
37
then,
Patrick?
yep, Alan Patrick,
Wow.
37. And I like that you bring up the backflips because, while I'm talking about Miles, Dan, I like you bring up the backflips and the Fusion XL because I feel like that guy got a lot of miles, right? He came in during that Brazilian expansion, right? Where everyone's freaking cousins. If you train with a Nogueira brother, you're getting a shot in the UFC. They got the TNT on the mat. Guys mysteriously have veins popping out of their arms. You know what era I'm talking about. This guy kind of snuck in and came to prominence here. And as we both see, you could accuse both guys of kind of doing bullshit and wacky tube, inflatable arm guy stuff with their arms and goofy stuff and bullshitting their way to decisions, or in Bobby Green's case, sadly, bullshitting his way to losses. The ironic part, though, was that Bobby Green was getting less results, but with his wacky tube inflatable arm guy thing, he's actually fucking fighting, pardon my French. He's throwing jabs. He's countering. He's doing really slick stuff for people that know striking. We'll see, but you're fighting in crowds. So the crowd's popping for the guy swinging and missing. The crowd's popping for that guy, and they're gonna root for there's the cocky black dude throwing jabs and talking smack. And I'm not trying to get racial or anything or bringing that up, but perception is a real thing. Fans aren't the most friendly or the most educated people, and so are the judges. And you just see Bobby Green on the wrong end of perception, whether it's fan perception, people perception, or judge perception. The great thing about this pandemic era, it's silent. Now now the judges are actually seeing what Bobby Green is landing. And again, the reason why I was so confident, even against a spoiler like Clay Guida, was because Bobby Green always had very underrated counter wrestling, not just counter punching, counter wrestling. The guy is an amazing freaking counter wrestler. Patrick is not getting anywhere with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game because, like you said, Dan, that's where he secretly scores his points. That's where he really wins the fights. That's where he steals and bullshits the rounds with those takedowns. So without the takedowns, his goofy arm stuff versus a guy that actually has a real goofy arm stuff, to put in really bad terms, I just don't see where Alan Patrick wins this. You mentioned him doing the backflips. Again, back to that Miles comparison. I think that, he came in doing backflips and trying to look all athletic and looking at my crazy multicolored dreads. Look at my pictures with, Jock Gray and the hose arm strength and conditioning coach they had. Like he had all the check boxes, right? But when it came to fight time, what did you actually do? I mean, he's the fancier version of Francimar Bahos, who people know how much I hate Francimar Bahos and breaking down his fights because he does nothing. At least Alan Patrick makes it look like he does something, but the guy does nothing. Unless you're a crappy grappler who's going to get taken down, he does nothing. This line should be minus 500 to me. If you're a big bettor, I don't blame you. I don't blame you for targeting this fight, even at the line it is. I know I feel really strong. I felt strong about both guys, and I feel like even though Alan Patrick has somehow managed to win more than he loses, objectively, I don't think what I'm saying is incorrect if you actually go back and look at him fight.
Yeah, no, I mean, speaking of bettors, I know a real big bettor that's got thousands on Bobby Green. So
I don't blame him.
I hear what you're saying. I'm going to lean Bobby Green as well. Got a lot of questions about Patrick. So Dan Tom, last but not least, we got a showdown, a flyweight fight between Matt Schnell and Tyson Nam. And I really feel like this is a case where I would say Schnell is actually the better fighter in almost every area except one big one, Dan Tom. You already know what that is. You're talking about one of the most devastating knockout artists in flyweight history in Tyson Nam versus a guy with a historically suspect chin. So, I mean, do you think Matt Schnell is going to dance around on the outside, outpoint him without getting touched that one big time and go out here, win this decision, potentially submit him?
Man, I like Matt Schnell. Shout out to my boy John Rico, who is his living, breathing doppelganger. He's a nice guy, a great guy to interview. He is constantly improving. He will burn you when you're not careful, even in fights where I picked against him. I believe where he triangle choked a couple guys like Naoki or other dudes. I was like, you know what? Even if I was picking against him, I'm stay away from this. I could see Matt Schnell getting that upset from guard. The problem is, I don't know if he gets that on Nam. Is he the better ground fighter than Nam? Yes. Is he the better all-around fighter from an MMA standpoint? I would argue yes. Does he put more volume and variety in every layer and overall? Yes. that is usually a big enough reason to pick against a guy like Tyson Nam. However, with the chin, as far as the weakness part, that's obviously why probably Nam, who opened as a slight underdog, money has come in, although the line is a bit contentious. I could see why the line movement came in on Nam for that reason. Nam is going to be my pick here, but also more importantly, the reason why I'm picking Nam, not just because of the proverbial chink in the armor lining up just perfectly, right? Which is what I imagine people are betting on if you placed a Nam wager. It's that Nam's criticism here actually may save him. And his criticism is he doesn't throw volume, right? And if he doesn't throw volume, what does that mean? He doesn't extend himself. Whether it's on the feet, he doesn't extend his combination. So he's usually doing the countering, hence him being a counter fighter and not getting countered for the most part. And even on the ground, he's holding position. Just like he holds position, he keeps his weight over his hips, like you like to see stand up, that nice Muay Thai stance. He also does that relatively well from a wrestling and grappling standpoint, whether he's on the defense or in a brief scramble. He keeps within himself. Can he be out scrambled? Sure. Yeah, but you got to really be a good wrestler and really be persistent. So as far as opportunistic submission threats, like Schnell arguably is, I don't like opportunistic guys against guys who don't give you a lot. You know what I'm saying? That's like, like Jose Aldo's unfair to bring up because he's Jose freaking Aldo, but you know what I'm saying? Like an opportunistic submission guy is the last guy that's going to beat Jose Aldo, even old shot Jose Aldo, because Jose Aldo doesn't extend himself. And so for that reason, that's kind of what has me leaning toward Nam. Am I uber confident telling you to go bet this side or that side? No, I'm not there with this fight, to be honest, but my pick is Nam.
And my pick is Nam as well, for the reason I mentioned, man. Look, Schnell's the better fighter across the board, but unfortunately for him, his chin is very suspect. I mean, not just his 3 official knockout losses, but actually one of his knockout, it's not officially a loss because he won by DQ. You guys know that kid, Jonathan Martinez, actually knocked him out with a knee. I mean, a knee touched him, he went unconscious. So that does not contribute to your chin or your longevity. So I mean, I think he's going to pick apart Tyson Nam until the bomb lands. And once the bomb lands, I think it's going to be over. So, I mean, besides Davison, God of War, Dice Dugea, Figueiredo, I think Tyson Nam is the hardest hitter in the flyweight division. So I'm expecting another one-punch knockout by Tyson Nam here on Saturday night in Las Vegas, Nevada.
I co-sign with that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I say I co-sign with that. Sorry.
You're all good, brother. Well, Dan Tom, let's go ahead, wrap this thing up. We truly want to thank everybody for their support. We truly appreciate it. Make sure you tell a friend, share this, give it a like, a subscribe. We truly appreciate it. Make sure you follow Dan at Dan Tom MMA. Follow me at Best Fight Picks. Go to linemovement.com. Follow us at line_movement. Make sure you subscribe and like this video. Don't forget. And also, big shout out to our producer, Jordan. Thank you so much, Jordan. To everyone behind the scenes, Brian, Nick, Joe, Dan, James, everybody. Thank you guys so much. We truly appreciate it. We'll be back next week for the next fight. And also, stay tuned to linemovement.com for the rest of the content we're dropping throughout the week. I know Dan Tom always has his badass betting article. I just put out an article, a feature, a write-up on Cody Durden, UFC. Now he's a flyweight. He's dropping a flyweight, but he had that very exciting draw with Chris Gutierrez, who is universally considered to be the hardest kicker in the bantamweight division, besides Marlon Moraes. So make sure y'all check that out at linemovement.com. Thanks again to everyone behind the scenes, to all our supporters. We truly appreciate it. Make sure y'all go, our Canadian listeners, go to blitzbet.eu. Our American listeners, stay tuned. We will talk very soon, and everybody stay safe out there and enjoy the fights.
What's up, everybody? If you liked the video you just saw, be sure to give it a like and subscribe down below at Line Movement and follow us at linemovement.com.